Hello, John. Thank you for coming back to the channel here. I believe this is our episode 17 in this long saga of the world
The
as it
saga of the
turns. As
world.
it turns. But let's start with the Olympics and your take on the opening ceremonies. I think there was a lot of symbolism that was taking place, and I want to get your take. You know, you have a very strong understanding of France and its history, and I think what you have to say is probably interesting on your interpretation of what happened with the Olympic opening ceremony.
Well, it
Oh,
was
before you start, let me remind the
right.
audience to please click the link in the description of this video and all of the videos I've been doing with John. That link will take you to his website, and that way you can purchase his periodical and you can schedule for a reading. That way you're helping support his work. He can continue on doing his thing, and you get information about current events and get a little bit of information on your own trajectory, especially if you do the reading. So, John, again, thank you for coming onto the channel. So let's begin with your take on the Olympic opening ceremony.
Fortunately, it's a good thing. I had a friend over who had a VPN, and so we were able to watch it live and then review it and see the whole thing. And it's glad I did because I saw things in this that certain kind of attempts to reinterpret things that were indicative of some of the kind of degenerating qualities of art and things that you find at the end of a great age. Um, the Although I also loved a lot of it, I loved the boats with everybody on them. That was beautiful. I thought it was a glaring gap in Olympic spirit that the Russians had no representation at all. This is one of the biggest teams, so I guess a lot of people are going to win gold, silver, and bronze medals without the Russians taking them. And I just think it's ugly that that has happened at the same time, and many people are feeling the same, especially the people who are looking at the whole issue of the Gaza Strip and what's going on there. They see that a lot of millions of people are asking, why was Russia out, or why, or if not Russia, why was Israel included? Why didn't the government? There's about 200,000 people that have died. This is the estimation, and it's probably low. Mostly men, women, and children, mostly, and on top of that, at least the good side of this terrible act is that more and more people are very publicly of Jewish heritage are are saying, look, Judaism is not Zionism. And the more this monstrous stuff is going on under this monstrous regime that's of Zionists, that it so they're allowed to compete, but the Russians, who were kicked out mainly as the scapegoat for all the nations of the European of the Olympics having doping problems. But just because it's like I said years ago that the new Jews of the fourth turning will be the Russians. And it was interesting that 10 years after that, I actually heard Vladimir Putin say the same thing after I said it 10 years ago. Every fourth turning takes a group of people and scapegoats them for all the problems. And I would just add that, I mean, the fourth turning is this 80-year cycle, just for some who don't know, that is 4 generations long. It starts with a crisis in the world. And well, it has been linked mostly to Anglo-Saxon history, primarily the United States in the last uh, tour of Pluto, 248 years of America's existence, because Pluto's position at birth in 1776 has been transited over by Pluto back and forth in retrograde and direct motion in a kind of intermediate period before it begins its 248 years of orbit before it comes back to the US birth sign again. And so, it started in, there were 7 passes, and we're coming towards the final pass, the final time that Pluto is in Capricorn. Structures, order, the terms of order, the Ragnar, that in the Viking apocalypse becomes the Ragnarök, a stability establishment is overthrown. And it it will not come back for another 240 years, 48 years. So in astrology, it just doesn't come back. Astrology planets tend to go back and forth in retrograde motion according to the position they're seen from Earth. That's why if we're going faster and then Mars looks like it's going backwards, because we're in the inner orbit going faster. So the astrologers use that as a way to look at retrogrades. In fact, we've got a retrograde coming in the early part of August. It's going to dominate August. It's going to come right over the Democrat convention. And it will pass, it won't be over until the 28th of August. So I think it starts around, let's see, I think it starts around the 2nd. Let's see if I get lucky. Let me just jump in there. It starts, it starts around the 6th. It ends on the 28th of August, I believe. It starts in Virgo, discernment. So, people kind of having to get their minds straight or getting their minds confused. So it's a review of how clear is your mind? How unclear is it? How unclear was it in the last 4 months, or clear in your forward progress through Mercury, which is the ruler of the mind? And because these retrogrades come for 3 weeks, roughly every 4 months. And this one is going to start on the 6th. And, we have a lot of confusion of mind in the politics of Europe and the United States. And that, and major choices are about to be made about the future of the United States, and also some European countries. So this is all very much of a ton of upheaval. But so we are in very revolutionary times that are about to happen, and they usually happen with chaos, with the breakdown of structures. The thing that makes this final pass so important. Well, I was going to say to you briefly that there were 7 passes, and how it's amazing how these passes happen when big things changed or were overthrown in our world. Starting with the inauguration of Joe Biden, the first passage began, reaching its closest being in late January into February of 2021. And then I think after that was I don't call offhand. I'm just going to mention some of the 7 that well, the 6 that have already happened. I mean, one of the passes was just when the 8-year civil war between the Donbas Ukrainians and the neo-Nazi regime that is in Ukraine, that the US picked, led to Russia doing a preemptive invasion of Ukraine, whose army, totally financed and built and trained for 8 years by NATO, to become the largest force in NATO, de facto, not official, but literally having the instructors right there. This has been happening all through this war. And they were ready. They were already starting their artillery offensive to go and violently take back the Donbass and clear it of all the Russian ethnic people. So they were going to commit an act of genocide. The Donbass people of Lugansk and Donetsk appealed one last time to the Russians. They're coming at us. We need your help. And so the Russian Duma and the parliament decided to accept these groups wanting to secede from a country that basically wants to kill them. And anyone who's been watching the last 10 years of this war, because it's a long war, the tension of the United States and America and the world was only recently from 22nd of February, 24th of February of 2022. But this has been a war of genocide and ethnic cleansing by the neo-Nazi majority that wanted to flush all the Russians out of Crimea. So they jumped over to Russia, and they could do it because they had only an isthmus that they could guard. And they had a Russian base already there on lease. So when the people of Crimea, 90% of them said, we don't want to be in Ukraine anymore, and the way they're threatening Donbass, they're going to kill us too. So the Russians came in, we're already there, so they just put off their emblems and they guarded the isthmus and kept the neo-Nazi militias from coming in. But they can't do that in Donbass. It's open to Ukraine's approach. So this war happened. This thing erupted, and Russia decided to had been provoked. You will see in history, once all the propaganda has died off because it's bunk, you will see the histories will have to write the truth that Ukraine was deciding to do a full-scale offensive on the 10th of March 2022. The Russians jumped the gun. As Putin often says, he grew up in streets of Leningrad, St. Petersburg today, as a kid, the rough streets of Leningrad. And he said, when you try to avoid a fight, and it comes finally to the point where you can no longer avoid it, hit first. And that's exactly what he did. And he had been trying to avoid this war for 8 years, doing negotiations and work. They almost had a negotiation even when the war started, because his first idea was just to go in fast, kind of get a peace deal early. And in March, just the following month, he almost had it. But the NATO people and America and sent in Boris Johnson to say, no, go on fighting to the last Ukrainian, and they did. And so 600,000 dead Ukrainians later, 60,000 dead Russians. Here we are. But so that's just one of them. The other one of the passes had was also when the Nord Stream was blown up. The plan for it and its detonation happened on one of those passes. The shutting down. No, it wasn't that. It was anyway. There's so many things to talk about since I saw you 2 weeks ago that I'm going to try to just jump away from that, and we'll eventually get to the Parisian thing because this is also very important. But there's just a lot going on in the world right now, and so I will just say that I was watching it. I enjoyed the Seine. I enjoyed the rain. It was pretty torrential that was hitting Paris. Uh, um, I really loved the one thing I thought was quite beautiful was the unique, in an attempt to be unique and break from tradition on how you do the Olympics, like go into the main stadium, the guy runs in with the lamp and lights the thing, and all the people march in. And this time they had them all kind of sail past and then all gather at the Eiffel Tower. Kind of remember not to speak in French. The Tour Eiffel, and so a lot of that I loved, but boy, there was some weird. I mean, I love that they actually had the Montgolfier balloon where it was launched in the Garden of the Tuileries. Um, in side note, there's a lot of mention of Les Tuiles, the place where you make bricks, what is it called? It's the tiles. You make tiles, brick-like colored tiles. And it existed when Nostradamus was in Paris, in a couple of visits that he did in Paris in his life. And so he saw it as the tile kilns and the visions of how that would end up being a palace in the future in the 1700s and all the things that happened around the revolution. which he dated accurately for 1792, back in the 1550s. Absolutely breathtaking predictions about the French Revolution, which he did not like at all personally. He's a royalist. He believed in the divine right of kings, but so he called it the vulgar advent. And that they'd make a calendar. They thought it was a new age, so they'd make a new calendar, which indeed happened in 1792. And the calendar was used up to and through much of the Napoleonic era. So that's not by chance. And there are hundreds of prophecies of Nostradamus that are like that, out of the thousands. There's about 5,000 prophecies if you look at each. Some of them are lots are in each verse, and it's about 5,000 prophecies. So the Montgolfier balloon being the torchlight, the torch tower, was a really great idea. It rose up and then it's just hovering there in this kind of gray slate balloon shape, very similar to Montgolfier's balloons, or the family that invented the balloons and flew them at that area. So I loved that. Um, but um, there was an attempt to do something. I wonder if a lot of you've noticed, I'm sure a lot of you have, how, the Oscars and some of the other theatrical things for award season, there was just the Grammys, there are literally satanic rites being performed in some of these things. A lot of red, a lot of blood, a lot of people with contorted faces, gyrating, not gyrating like we did as sannyasins of Osho with blissful faces and all, but kind of like, like crazy people,
Mhm.
and and so I mean, as the thing went on, there were actually some really nice mimes and pantomimes, and I kind of liked some of the costumes where they tried to make it. I didn't quite like this character that was running around with a rapier mask for fencing on his face, so you couldn't see his face. That was a little freaky, and he was kind of running around on the lead roofs of Paris. I thought it was brilliant how they did his taped stuff and perfectly cued it into the live stuff. Like when he had to actually appear live coming off of something, that was technically that was fantastic. That's very hard to do. And it was in driving rain. It didn't matter. They did it anyway. I know a friend of mine, a longtime friend who's in Paris right now. She was complaining a lot about how there was a lot of other things that they were going to do, like fireworks and stuff, that the rain literally just washed away. But I think it was just great, most of it. But and then there was the beautiful things of the pantomimes that were dancing and on these little islands. I love the faces with their mouths just at the waterline, and how these beautiful faces of Pompadour and Marie Antoinette. And I mean, the French do have style, but sometimes they take the style weird. And I mean, I even liked that they had cleaned the oldest part of the Louvre, which is I'm sympathetic to, because it's so much the Louvre that you see with the beautiful gold stone and the lead beautiful spires. Um, I've never seen it that clean. When I was in Paris, it's usually like black with soot, so you can really see that beautiful French, Parisian yellow stone, which is there are huge catacombs under Paris, where all that stone throughout the thousands of years has been brought up and built the city with this beautiful unity of yellow stone, and and so they had washed it clean, and they did this whole thing of the French Revolution, and I mean, it was kind of weird and kinky that they had Marie Antoinette all dressed in red with her neck exposed with a viscera in it, and she's holding her own head, which is actually a living person singing. And I thought, okay, well, the French can kind of get kinky. Uh, it's an ancient tradition. I was like, okay, okay, I get it. That's okay, kind of freaky, but all right. And it's kind of making fun of what happened to thousands of people getting guillotined, but okay. Um, I'm tolerant of a lot of stuff, but and I even actually liked how there was the one time they didn't make it so in these kind of satanic things so obvious. They did a thing where all these streamers erupted off the beautiful castles. This is the same castles where Catherine de' Medici and Charles the Ninth and all the major characters of Nostradamus's prophecies lived. Those balconies were the same balconies that during the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre where Charles the Ninth took out his arc, as Nostradamus called his arquebus, his matchlock musket, and with all of his nobles around him, all dressed in grim black and beret, he fired upon Huguenots, Protestants running in the streets away from the massacre when the Catholics started massacring all the princes and princes of the Huguenots that had come to on a hot August in 1572 to see the marriage of the Valois with the Bourbon, which had actually in those days were down in Bigorre and Pau down in near Biarritz in modern day times, and they later from the struggles that went on, they later in the 9 wars of religion that Nostradamus tried to warn against for risk his life to talk about publicly. He lived to see the first of 9 of them, and it ended up with Henry of Navarre and the Bourbon actually winning, and the House Valois bloodline snuffed out, and so there was all that. I was feeling all that looking at this stuff, and then when they had all the they were using the windows like cannon holes, and that was rather interesting. And then they started to and then they had these streamers exploding out, and the streamers were a subtle, like the purging of the French Revolution by blood. This is a much more violent revolution than the American Revolution was. And its Pluto return, is happening from 2034 through 2036. So that's going to be probably the biggest surge of revolutionary feeling all this time in this Pluto return all around the world. Literally revolutions like breaking from the West, as the BRICS are doing. They will probably have completed that movement of the global majority, where the West now is only 17% of the world's population. It's making such a stink about everybody pulling away from the US dollar and from the Western dominance. And if you just read and watch Western news, you won't know that the whole world is making this huge surge away from the West. The vassals of Europe that are the United States vassals, all coming because of the US dollar being abandoned, because the US dollar has been abusive to the point where people are expanding it. And actually, not in this same period of time, in the last 2 weeks, the introduction of a new sprint system by the BRICS is already ongoing, and they're starting to create a system where an alternative system from the sprint American system, where your transactions can be moved in and out of different countries without being sanctioned and blocked, like is happening. So that stuff's brewing, and that's going to come to a head in between the mid 2020s into the mid 2030s because of the end of this American era ending and the beginning of a return karmically of Pluto to the French Revolution. So these streamers were coming down, and I thought, what a nice way, and rather than have blood spraying all over the place, but these streamers just floating in the wind, and the way they catch like streams, metaphorical of blood, but not really just being gross about it. And now this beautiful, many of you probably don't understand what this boat with this lady, this beautiful, voluptuous opera singer, she was singing this mezzo soprano, and she ended up singing Carmen, which when I was an opera singer, I did Carmen a lot because it's probably the most performed opera in the world. and she's floating regally with this boat with the streamers falling on some of them on her face and shoulders. And that is the ship, the sailing ship, the bark or something that is the symbol of the flag of Paris, which is a blue and red flag with a golden ship and sail. And she was on the ship. So, you know, Paris being the source of the French Revolution, when they created the tricolor, the tricolor, the blue, white, and red flag. I think because at the beginning of the revolution, the constitutional monarchy being the white Bourbon, cockade, the white was added to the red and the blue and red of Paris, and that's how the tricolor was created. And that was in the first stages of the French Revolution when they were trying to establish a monarchical, what's the word? It's a constitutional monarchy where the king is more a figurehead and the National Assembly and all the people and were more running the show, just like you see in Britain. But then, famously predicted by Nostradamus in a quatrain that was Century 9, Quatrain 20, I believe, is the famous flight to Varennes, where Nostradamus, this is one of his most amazing prophecies. He literally, the king promised with Marie Antoinette and the family, when they were taken from Versailles, promised the people of Paris, they were taken to the Tuileries, by the way, to be there, and there was all this pressure for the other kingdoms that wanted the king to escape and then create some great war to restore the monarchy to France. And of course, the French revolutionary country would have none of that. And so, but he promised that he would stay, he would not escape from his people and do that, but he ended up trying it. And, you know, the prophecy is remarkable. He talks about, describes the coach that there would be a monk in gray, that was the Carmelite monk costume that Louis XVI was wearing. The Queen's white stone came up. That was the controversy of the white diamond necklace, which was incredibly expensive, being given to the Queen Marie Antoinette when people were starving, and it was another big trigger. You know, you just watch back then as well as now, issues of bread and food and jobs are the triggers of revolutions. And we have a whole lot of fuses that are about to be lit in our world, mainly in the Western world, in the same way that happened back then. And we still have we have in America, especially, a completely disconnected, well, in Europe too, the European techno dictatorship of Brussels. They don't listen to the people any more than the people of French aristocracy in Versailles did. Um, we have a global aristocracy, the Klaus Schwabes, who are trying to create a global interconnected aristocratic rulership over us, the unwashed masses, and they look down their nose and they don't even consider us. That's not new. And it's not new if it brings people back to guillotines. You know, this is, hopefully that will not happen. I'm trying to warn and prevent this from happening. But, you know, aristocracies, they get to a point where they want to exploit middle classes like they did back in those days. And because the middle classes knew how to make money, knew how to make more and more wealth. And of course, the aristocracy sitting on their bums in their satin pants and skirts, they can sit back and go, well, we just take a little of that. And then the problem is the middle class is getting tired of having people over them, dictating over them. Well, it's happening again. Brussels has now become the new Versailles. And the leaders there are completely disconnected to the people. And the people are beginning to rise up. And between now and the mid 2030s, they will have rose up. So anyway, there was a lot there was a lot to show in that part of French history, which I enjoyed with this. I enjoyed the 16th century fellows in their black and white outfits doing tumbling, and a lot of great talent. And then all the men and women on the poles swinging back and forth. That was also very interesting. Um, but of course, it couldn't just be a love story between men and women. This incredible thing where they had these guys, these harlequins running around and coming in and out of apartments and all. But it had to be, transgender, and there's this Oriental like lady man kind of person, and then there's one woman they're all after, and it's just sort of, but it's just like rubbing our noses in it, and without a lot of subtlety. I mean, the most subtlety was the French Revolution part, but it just got worse as the boats made their journey down towards the Eiffel Tower. It just got more woke and more, virtue signaling. And then there was this it was remarkable but kind of creepy, that little submarine that had a mechanical horse riding over the water. And that was genius, but genius in service of what? I mean, and then there's that statue there, no life, and the horse, and I was just saying before the show to Paul, I said, when I saw that silvery like person, I couldn't tell whether they were trying to do a collision between one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, the pale horse, but because he was so regally dressed, it was almost like Pale Horse meet Glorious and True, with sticking out his sword, which is like a tongue that slaughters the sinful millions, something like that. That was the gist of it. And that's in Book of Revelations. Um, and then when this thing finally came to the place, and then the guy was actually an artist, was on top of the horse riding under the Tower of Eiffel Tower into the main um, set there. And he's coming in, and he's still just a long, long time looking at this guy riding, almost like, what's he going to do? Start the end of the world? It's very apocalyptic. And I was saying to my friend, I said, the horse, I was even pretending to be a horse and cracking him up. And he's saying, it was like Mr. Ed. I mean, the horse was like, "Oh, I'm just going to look down a few feet before me. I don't understand what they're doing here. I just want my hay and go home." So I was cracking up my friend, because he was like, that horse was like, I really don't, this is kind of weird for me, and I'm just a normal horse. And then all this build up. And then the camera makes sure that you see the golden bull, big golden bull with his horns. And what are we now going to celebrate, the golden calf? Where's Moses coming out with I've got 15 commandments in his 3 tablets, and he drops one like Mel Brooks did. And he goes, I got 10 commandments. That would have been funny if they did that. But it's the whole celebrating the golden calf, and here is the golden calf, now a mature bull. What's that message? Like, now we got our the anti-Christian, anti-Jewish, antichrist is now a full bull. So I'm thinking, okay. And it was so weird. They bring up that guy, and he just gets off the horse and gives the maps or something to the guy, and it just walks off like nothing. It's like big like flat. And I thought, what is that about? And of course, then there comes the probably Michelangelo might have wanted to do that. what they did with the Last Supper. You know, Michelangelo was gay, but I think he would not have done that. You know, he would have. Well, he,
Wait, was it Michelangelo or was it Da Vinci? I
I'm
thought
sorry,
Last Supper,
I'm
Da
sorry.
Vinci. Yeah, Da
I've
Vinci.
been
Yeah.
editing for 5 hours, so
No, it's all right. It's all
I'm a
right.
little frazzled.
And what is
Um,
interesting, about the Last Supper by Da Vinci is that he was experimenting with the pigments, and
yes.
the part of the reason why the Last Supper decayed, so the way it decayed over time was because of this experimentation that he did with the pigments.
Well, it also was unfortunately there was moisture in the fresco.
Right,
The
right,
Yeah, and that
right.
was, I heard that was the main reason. But I just saw a really great documentary about Da Vinci, and the whole pigment issue, and it was beautifully done.
Mhm.
And I'm not I have many gay friends. I love my gay friends. I love, just so people know that I I love my gay friends because it's so rare to have men who are so kind and affectionate. You know, I can go come up to my gay friend and hug him like people used to do in the Napoleonic times, where men would hug each other very passionately. And it doesn't mean it was going to go any further, but if it did, it was not really my business, you know. But this whole this whole kind of vibe of, we're gonna rub it in your face because you've got to support us as we are, and it's just like, no, I don't. And most, I don't. I No. Basically, um it's what people do in their own freedom and responsibility, I support. um Uh, I would just simply say, and this will probably upset some people, but I'll say it because one of the things I'm seeing happening in this kind of decline, degeneration period before a new era, is that diseases that are diseases, like Trump derangement syndrome, like diaspora, or gender dysphoria,
Dysphoria. Yeah.
gender dysphoria is a disease. But we are being told by people, no, I'm not sick. I'm not mentally ill. You now have to accept me as I am. And if I want to pretend that by um, doing certain surgeries to augment or change my appearance, that turns me from a man into a woman or a woman into a man. Well, because I believe I am, then I am. Well, no, that's mental illness. I mean, no one would, what if I say I want to be a 6 foot pink bunny rabbit named Howard, you know? Uh, and what would they do? I mean, I've seen some people make that point to them, and I've watched people who are into the whole woke thing. They kind of go, and then they go, okay, well, if you want to think you're a pink bunny rabbit, then you are. And he says, okay, well, uh, I I want to eat your grass, and you can't stop me because it's my right. I'm going to like start eating your grass in your front lawn. And you're going to say, and what are you going to do? Going to say, well, I guess because I think I see, he's like the emperor's new clothes syndrome, that people are trying to create. Well, everybody sees the emperor's naked because this con artist has got him to believe that he's putting on this wonderful magic robes and all. Of course, the con artist is a real master con artist. He says, oh, by the way, your majesty, if something that might happen, people might be trying to be polite, but you watch that. If people are a little nervous, just understand that these magical clothes can't be seen by people who are bastard children of their father. They'll see only naked people. They'll only see you as naked. So people who are illegitimate will see you as naked, but don't worry about that. There's not so many. Of course, the truth is he is naked. So everybody is going, oh my God, he's naked. Oh my God, that means I'm not my father's son or daughter or something like that. No, well, I can't deal with that. So Oh, look, I can see it. You see it too. Yeah, we all see it. What a beautiful clothes. My God. Until the kid says, "Hey, Dad, the emperor's naked." So there's this effort to celebrate and actually legalize as something okay that, I'm sorry, folks, it isn't okay. Uh, Gender, I can't think of the name of the moment, but people who think they're a different gender than they are, that's just not real. Now, I've said it before on the show, is and I've had friends that I've helped with this. I've helped them make the decision, and I was for their decision, whatever it was. I've had friends that have made this transition, and I also have friends that it's ruined their lives. And I also know that a lot of these political folks that want to perpetuate this stuff, they sit on those people in the transgender community and try to hide them away and shut them up. But they're the majority. It's a big mistake because this is a sickness. It's not a new idea of new gender identities. I mean, remember, identity comes from the same root word of idiot. And identity is a struggle, whatever persuasion you want to identify with. But so, this sort of like rub our noses in it, take Da Vinci's beautiful Last Supper. You get this morbidly obese young woman who's playing Jesus Christ, and you've got all the other people in more twisted versions of the apostles all around her. And then there's some big egg opens up, and this guy with a gold painted beard and looks like I don't know, a Oompa Loompa or something kind of comes up, like Neptune as an Oompa Loompa. And I'm thinking, and then when it's all done, the bacchanalia is not even a beautiful bacchanalia. It's all these people contorting and twisting like they're having withdrawals from drugs, called a dance. And I'm pretty free-spirited liberal person in a lot of ways, more radical than a lot of people know. And I can see things that are really unusual, but I know, maybe such times are the times where lines are crossed and people say, that's too far. And I would even add this, and in my more recent, I'm working on these new articles for my next release of the Hogue Prophecy Report. I make a statement that's probably going to upset some people. I said, you know what? Everything in its time has a good thing about it. Even totalitarianism has its moment when it's needed. I've spoken before about Cincinnatus, a true story, where we get the word citizen from. He, the democracy sometimes in emergency can't get a quorum to make a decision to do things. And so what they did in Rome is they gave this man 6 months where he was absolute ruler of Rome so he could stop the Italian invasion, raise an army, and defeat the Italians this is when Rome was very young. It was just Latium. And so, as I've said, I'll just make it briefly, when he was finished, and he did it all in 2 months rather than 6 months, he comes back to the Senate, and the Senate says, well, according to our laws, you have the legal right to remain our dictator for another 4 months. And he said, no. He handed back the fascia, where we get the term fascist, which is a symbol of Roman Senate, the axe with the twigs twined around it. He handed it back and said, no, I miss my plow. I miss my vines. I want to go back to my estates and just farm. And so there are times when you have to have a single leader do something for a while, but these times of emergency always must end. And except for Cincinnatus, not once but twice, he had to do it another time later. And he did the same thing. He did fix the problem, went back home, back to democracy. So, and the problem is we're entering a time where I've been warning about this situation for 20 years about how, I used to say in letters to people back in the 1990s, they would just like be saying, and they were liberal people and Democrats and all, and they were saying, oh, I hate where the Republicans are taking it. It's going to be awful and terrible. And I said, you know what? In 20 years, in the 2020s, when things start unraveling and you don't know when your next meal is going to be or whether you can pay the bills. And I imagine that the people who protest way too much about Republican extremism, you'll be the people who will really put the emergency, shut the countries down, do stuff. Because the problem always is that every person who is liberal is hiding a tyrant, and every potential tyrant on the conservative side could be hiding a liberal. You know, it. I mean, I have over the years I've gotten 50,000 letters or more, and I've answered many of them. And the thing I've seen from because I, especially in this period, every 4 years when I'm doing political predictions at the peak of what I do since 1968, and I tend to really upset some people, and often I'll lose readers who loved me for the last 4 years because I agreed with them. And then suddenly I'm doing a 180 where I'm actually saying, oh, well, actually, the other guys are going to win this one, and it might be better. I'll be saying, like, I think we've reached a point where too much libertine liberalism, and I'm saying this as a liberal, we need to come back a little to the center and maybe a little to the center right and get kind of grounded again. You know, get this deep state stuff off our backs and return this country to a constitutional republic. And I think at this time the weather vane of history is a little more centered, a little right from the left right now. The left has kind of gone off the track. And if it goes with this woke stuff, it's just degenerating everything. And you know, if and to my Democratic friends, if you have you seen what's happened to the Democratic Party primaries in the last three tries? I mean, Hillary Clinton won by declaring all the delegates super delegates at the beginning. She started with thousands of super delegates in 2016. And these delegates actually are like an aristocracy within the voting public, the rank and file folk who used to go to conventions and really vote for what the Democratic Party and its people wanted. And so super delegates were created to step on the people's will. And they got worse. In 2020, Biden's rolled in. I mean, first off, it started in the Ohio. What is it?
Iowa. It's the Iowa caucus.
Iowa caucus, yes. In the Iowa caucus, um, there was a person that Tulsi Gabbard in 2 minutes destroyed, and that person couldn't even get 1% of the vote. And that person, she left, one of the first candidates to leave. And then as things went on, it was clear that Biden was also not winning. But there was, I always wondered when Obama would play kingmaker and make a few calls. And so the first call was to Clyburn of South Carolina to get the black vote out for Biden. And he got the black vote out for Biden, and Biden won his first primary. And then, this is early in the primaries, and then with that in his pocket, Obama starts calling all the other candidates, and he makes deals. The Democratic Party's rank and file, the people, had no say in this. He just went around, and so he gave Klobuchar, if you get out, you'll get a part in the cabinet, and you over here will get a part in the Biden cabinet. So this is not the man running who's choosing the cabinet for Joe. And then within a few weeks, except for Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie Sanders, And I think a little bit Bloomberg, he survived for a while, but then he also surrendered to Obama. One man chose your candidates. Millions of Democrats had no say in it. This is totalitarianism, liberal totalitarian. Remember, the Stalinists were liberals. The Bolsheviks were radical liberals. And their way of arguing with a person back in 1917 is just the way woke people argue with you today. They don't have a discussion with you. They suddenly say, "You're a racist. You hate gay people. You don't like this. You don't like that, and or you don't like women, so you're a sexist and a racist." You know, if you were in Bolshevik times, they would say, "You're an enemy against the state." That would be their answer. And they'd shout you down and eventually pull you out and then shoot you. I wonder how many steps it has to take before we get there if liberalism out of control, out of balance, continues. So, you know, already I'm feeling that a lot of people out there are thinking this is a little too much. And, you know, most people won't say this stuff. And it'll get you banned and it'll get you in trouble. But this, I mean, I'm I've been doing coast to coast for 30 years and now they don't want to touch me, it seems, because they're not calling me anymore. You know, 8 months now, no call. They used to always call me up every 2, 3 months for 30 years. So I guess I've gotten too hot potato for them. But this is the time to be a hot potato. I mean, this is the time to stand up and say, look, there's certain priorities that have to get back to, and then we can sort out whether you want to be a pink bunny rabbit or not. But or you're a man who wants to be a woman, or you think that you can give puberty blockers to a child who's not even who's a minor, and some states are even opening, allowing that to happen. This is not this is not sane. And so this kind of, you know, and satanic rituals on the Oscars, on the Tonys, you know, the this whole idea of all these people wearing devil things and red and all that. That's religious fascism to me. And all fascism always ends in a bad way. So, um, so this is this day and age, this time, these things are this have to be confronted, and some risk has to happen. I mean, our founding fathers and mothers risked their lives and their freedom to, and they were unwilling actually to even originally leave the British Empire, but the British Empire wouldn't listen to them. The British Empire, they were the aristocrats and go, oh, shut up, and we'll throw all these taxes at you that destroy your economy and beat you down so you pay off all of the debts that we've decided without your choice that you've got to pay because of the French-Indian War. And so as if we didn't also fight, you know, the colonial British of American colonies didn't fight and die in those wars ourselves. And I think it's a shared burden not to all dump it on these people. Well, we came in with our army and saved you from the French and the Iroquois and all that. Now you have to pay the burden. It was just wrong. And when things are wrong like that, they fester and they eventually end up with karmic comeuppance. And so the so it's hard. It's there's not a lot of it's difficult now because the media that most people have used is now become a complete puts a lid on truth, tells you what to think, how to feel. And thanks to Elon Musk, there is one public commons, and he's openly supporting it. And of course, there's a lot of ugly stuff that comes on it. Again, democracy is messy. if you want democracy to run like all the trains on time and not have a difficult process, which, by the way, if you've done your civics classes, which most people haven't even known what that is for the last 30, 40 years, because these classes that I grew up with taught you about your rights as a citizen and how you must defend them legally or, as the Second Amendment allows, through militias. It is so that is, I mean, this is the first government that actually allowed its citizens to arm themselves in case the government goes crazy. Like now. I'm not saying we're going to go there. I hope we don't, but I am not afraid to say that these things are looming. And it was the thing that's so scary about revolutions is often that a lot of the revolution is carried up by the groupthink, the crowd mind. And it's the most unconscious force when humans are a mob. They don't, oftentimes when mobs do what they do after all the raping and pillaging and stuff is done, burning things down, like happened with Black Lives Matter. You can watch it. It's like watch those videos of people just coming in droves, breaking things up, stealing everything they can. It's just uh, it's mob thing. It's like they might as well be mice running around. I mean, they're not using their brain, their human brain. There's no individuality. Um, and that is unfortunately a sideline, a side aspect of revolutions, and it certainly happened in the French Revolution, the Reign of Terror. Well, that was the guillotines, and how ironic it is that Robespierre, who created the Reign of Terror, being of the top three people, the top of the public safety, because it was called the Montagnard. They were called the three people, the Montagnard with Robespierre. And Nostradamus talked about the Montagnard, the Montagnard Armada. He saw these people. And it's ironic that the last person to be guillotined was Robespierre, the man who created this whole monstrous 2 years of terror. So, and then what happened with the French Revolution? It got weary of this craziness and it kind of mellowed, as it often happens in revolutions, although fortunately it didn't happen for ours. We were very graced in our revolution that we did not have this whole massive destruction and then everybody's just worn out and like going, what did we do all that for? And kind of come out of that mob think. And so it's very, very important to have some way to keep the thread of your consciousness with you 24/7 and not be carried off in the flood of unconscious mobs, because these are the times when those kind of things happen. So, and the more conscious people are, and that's what I do in my readings, I try to give ways for people to navigate through these um, whirlwind times. And that's what Nostradamus called the French Revolution. He called it the whirlwind because it almost exactly a year before the Bastille was stormed, and this prison where prisoners were put in at the edge of town was stormed, and it was on 14th July 1789 created the French Revolution. Exactly a year ago, as I was reading the journals of the period, and there was a weather phenomenon, like a derecho with tornadoes that passed through central France and destroyed the crops of 1788, which means the impact with food prices and lack of food came 1789. And it was called in the journals the whirlwind, the trombe, now in Old French. Now, there have been Nostradamians who are always trying to find whatever they think Nostradamus said. They come with their conclusions made, and then, of course, with obscurity of Nostradamus and the fact that most of them don't study 16th century French or the other languages that Nostradamus used in his prophecies. I seem to be one of the few left live. Everybody just grabs a bad translation of Nostradamus and runs with it. And because trompe, some people look at that and they think trompette, and it means trump. So that's probably going to come up again in Nostradamia. It takes no Nostradamus scholar to predict it. They're going to start pulling out the trompe, the trompe, this trump. But the problem with that is it all works fine unless you ignore the other 29 words or 30 words in the quatrain. And I cited before, and probably will have to cite it again, how all these things that people like Victor Baines and other people are saying is this. Um, the rest of the prophecy doesn't support it at all. So, and I was trying to say, well, let's see if, I mean, I don't come in with an opinion. I come in, well, let's see, let's see if there is something that would go, that's interesting. That might be about Trump. That one of the three or four. But there weren't any. I mean, I make it clear that I'm certainly pro-Russian in this war with Ukraine because I don't like Nazis. And that Ukraine is under the disease of Nazism right now. And so but as Alexander Mercouris of the Duran said, who's also one of the finest people to watch, really highly recommend him on the Duran on YouTube and other outlets. He says, well, yeah, I am my lean towards being pro-Russian because I'm an Orthodox Christian and I'm Greek Orthodox, and I sympathize with what's going on with that. But that doesn't mean just because you're kind of favoring one side in your own personal view that you can't be very objective. I can tell you this: if Russia were losing, I would report it. I would report it in detail, but they're not. So, if one takes that argument another way, well, let's say you're on the side of the Allies. What are you saying? You can't do good intelligence on what the Third Reich is doing, even though you're on the side that wants to defeat the Third Reich. I mean, unfortunately, what's happening in intelligence around now is bias comes first and fact comes last. And that is one of the things that's making what you're hearing on the news and what's really going on in the world completely different. But take a case in point, just recently, we've gone through the whole thing of Biden leaving the office since we did this. I mean, it was just a few days, I think, after the Trump assassination attempt. So we talked about it on part 16. But since that time, of course, Biden was forced in a very weird way with a letterhead that had not the presidential seal or the letterhead of White House, but just kind of a Joe R. Biden. So it's just some office letterhead. And I'm posting the letter and the signature and other Biden signatures to show that it's fake. And and the letter didn't even talk about who's going to then run in his place until a few minutes later they had to send another message. So it's clearly a forgery. And I don't think Joe Biden's written two sentences together for about 3 years now, if he was even able to do that when he started. So anyway, but the thing that really screws this up is he really should resign and give all of it over to Kamala Harris. But they're not going to do that because I was watching some shows where this question came up. I said, "Isn't this is not how the democracy works?" Like what I was saying back in the last thread about how Obama picked everybody, and basically, and then we had this Democrat primary where some primaries were just skipped over. They just didn't have them. They didn't let the people of Florida. The Florida Democrats didn't get a chance to vote. They didn't get a chance to write somebody in if Biden was the only one left right at the beginning. And so they didn't get a chance to vote. In New Hampshire, so the Democratic leadership this time, so encouraged by not causing a row, and the other two times they've been so undemocratic. And this is what you saw in the Soviet Union, ladies and gentlemen. This is how they used to say, "Oh yes, everybody goes out to vote in the Soviet Union. They vote." They all pick who is there, and of course, the people that are picked are the people the Politburo wants, and you better vote for them. Well, you better vote for Kamala, who, by the way, was the lady that couldn't even get 1% in 2020. She had a completely failed campaign. She she has now become the person, Miss 1%, who is going to go up against Trump in the national elections. How's that going to work out? You know, and she's actually she's now going to have to her own policies she's going to try to make while the president has different policies. For instance, she told off Netanyahu, was very icy with him because she doesn't like what's going, God bless her, doesn't like what's going with killing 200,000 and counting Palestinians and probably injuring an even larger number, um, where they're starving them to death. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's 1,000 to 2,000 Palestinians dying, most the infirm and the young, in droves now in Gaza Strip. And so, and that brings me to the other situation that there has been some rockets that crashed and killed 10 Druze Arabs in the Golan Heights. And before that happened, the Secretary of State of Israel was screaming that they Hezbollah just killed a lot of Israeli citizens. And these Druze people just recently said, in fact, when Smolich, the guy who runs the Interior, Secretary of the Interior, extreme right wing guy, I saw a movie of the people at the funeral pushing him out, saying, "Don't you even come into our funeral." First off, we're not. In fact, it was happening. There was somebody on the Israeli news had his mic on, and they were interviewing somebody, and he had not taken off his mic, and you can hear him when the guy's saying, "Yeah, these Israeli citizens got killed by Hezbollah," and you hear him say in Hebrew, he said, "No, he didn't. They're not Israeli citizens." He just like, so a truth bomb accidentally happened. The Druze are of the occupied Golan Heights, who do not consider themselves Israeli citizens because it was occupied. They consider themselves Syrian citizens since 1967 and the generations that followed. And so here's this guy screaming about, okay, we're going to respond to this with no tolerance. We're going to really hit you hard. And the Hezbollah. And it's almost like a false flag because actually what killed those kids in the soccer field, Iron Dome missed its target and crashed in the soccer field. They were killed by friendly fire. They were killed by Iron Dome missing a target and crashing. It was Israeli missiles that killed those people who are not Israelis. They are Druze. They see themselves as Syrians in an occupied territory of the Golan Heights since 1967. So Netanyahu comes to both houses of the Congress, meet him. Um, the the Speaker of the House actually threatened the assembled people that if they made any noise or any protests, he would arrest them. These people practicing their free speech. The Speaker of the House, the third person that can be president. This is not democracy that's happening here. This is not, you don't, and there was a coup d'etat that took out Biden. I mean, he was coerced. And when he was gone for 5 days in Vegas, he comes out, his speech is slurring more. I think he had a little stroke, and because he's more. I mean, my mother, I took care of, and she would have small strokes, and it's just like his little slurry. He doesn't. He's really slurring a lot, and you'll notice they're not having him talk a lot because. And now he's really kind of, you know, just kind of one-faced now. Even when he did his little speech, it was so robotic. And I don't know. I think he's starting to get strokes, and so they may want to keep him in. I know why, because they're afraid that Kamala Harris, if she's president, is going to break up the deep state's cabinet, and if she was made the president successor before the 20th of January. But I've been writing about this that they want to keep Biden going, and they're going to take this tragic elder abuse to the ultimate end. And I mean, it's going to probably be a point where um, they can't do it anymore because he literally is non-compos mentis and he can't even talk. He doesn't know where he is. He's sitting in his wheelchair or what? I don't know. It's so they're literally, I mean, how far can you play this obscenity of democracy, of non-democracy? Well, they can play it because they don't care about any of us. And there's a whole lot of people in the Republican Party who are exactly the same. They don't care. You know, they want to hitch their star to a winner like Trump, but I would imagine they will try to do and try to put this deep state all over him like they did the last time. There are some signs, though, that Trump learned. And I know that some people have been putting out in the mainstream news that Jamie Dimon and the guy Fink, who runs BlackRock, were going to be chosen as head of commerce and head um, of the Treasury. It might be the other way around. And when I first heard that, I said, "Oh man, here we go again." You know, Trump almost got us into World War III 2 times because he has a lucky star. His true north star is one of the luckiest I've ever seen of any human being in astrology. Fortunately, he avoided the one in June 2019 when John Bolton, who he somehow decided after he knew Bolton wanted to fight wars with everybody, somehow he just kind of channeled it. They know how to influence that kind of gut thing that he says. I got good common sense. Well, they manipulate him pretty good. I hope he's learned from that because suddenly here's the guy that he's saying the guy who wants to fight wars with anybody. Why the hell is he the NSA director now? Well, he immediately almost got us in a war with Iran, and that time Trump's innocence. Another good sign that I'm seeing more and more as it comes out. Good sources, Robert Barnes, who also is a legal advisor to Trump, as well as very much involved in this Amish natural foods trial that's going on in Pennsylvania. And he's one of I try to get my sources everywhere. If I want a good communist or socialist source who's a thinking socialist, um, Caleb Maupin. If I want to get a more moderate socialist, I get Chris Hedges. If I want to, for a while he was still able to do it, if I wanted to get a good thinking version from the right, extreme right, Buchanan. You know, I'm kind of I'm in the middle. I'm a free wing, but because I'm that way, I contend that I can I can find a lot of, I try to find people who are thinking on all sides. I'll even talk to a thinking ISIS or a thinking fascist. It's just that's how you find out where people tick. It's so important to know what the other person is thinking and why they think that way. Um, and we have now a foreign policy where the people don't do that at all. I'll give you a case in point. Scott Ritter's, one of his twin daughters, he related the story last week. One of his twin daughters is working to be in diplomatic stuff. She went to Georgetown University, and I think and she wants to specialize because she's half Georgian from, the Caucasus country, because Scott married a Georgian wife, And so the two are very proud of that heritage as well, as their American heritage. And so she wanted to be a specialist in Georgian studies and situations, intercultural connections. So when Scott got the invite to go to Russia and see it, and she ended up going along with him because she would be getting firsthand experience. Not only did she go in the Caucasus, she got to meet the head of the Chechens, and she interacted with them. So Scott was relating that she kind of expected that when she came back to Georgetown to her professors and all, that they would be like, so what's it like? I mean, because that's how Scott grew up, like I grew up. If you want to be in intelligence, if you want to be in diplomacy, you want to know what the other side's thinking, and so it's gold to have somebody, even if you disagree with it. It's good to know what people are thinking or saying, because maybe you can find that's only when you can find a common ground. And so she goes back to Georgetown, innocently hoping they shut her out. How dare you talk to those people? I mean, these are the teachers of our diplomatic agencies, of our leaders, of our future Kennedys and Khrushchevs. And what they're saying is diplomacy means we don't know what the frick you are or what the frick you do, and we're proud of it. We are ignorant of you. We just see you as we see you. And if you don't fit the way we see you, we don't talk to you. That's diplomacy today. That'll get us all killed in World War III. So, there's the cancer that has to be exposed. I mean, his poor gal, she comes in, she's really done diplomatic study and work. She's ready. She can be an interactor with the Caucasus, the North and South Caucasus as her specialty. She's been there. She's talked to them. That's a bozo no-no in this current situation. So she's kind of been shunned at Georgetown,
Yeah.
doing
I
her
think
job.
this also I think this also applies to Trump because he never aligned himself with the CFR or the Trilateral Commission.
That's right. That's right. Well, Trump is another example of something I wrote about decades ago, where I said the change won't happen if the people themselves do it on their own. They're going to have help. They're going to have one percenters, the 1% thing where 1% has most of the wealth and the rest of us don't. The aristocracy, I would call it in older terms, the aristocracy. People in the aristocracy have to be bold enough to see what's going on and move out of it, like a Kennedy, like an Elon Musk. I mean, we have a large window to free speech and what's really going on in the world, thanks to Elon Musk by spending $40 billion to buy Twitter and throw out all those, you know, virtue signaling. He had an army of people. I was just seeing today. He said, "Well, you had like what 20,000 people employed here, and now how many do you have?" He said, "Many thousand." I said, "Well, it was Tucker Carlson was saying," and he said, "Well, how do you run this thing?" And he said, "Well, actually, it's quite simple," said Musk. He said, "You um, if you're a free place, you don't have to have armies of censors." Because you need a lot of sensing, an army of sensors to make that all go. And so we don't need sensors. So we only need 8,000. And the other thing he did, which wasn't in this talk, but he said, well, I just told the people there, if you don't know how to work in code, you're fired. So all these people who didn't know they just knew how to work in woke, not in code, not actually the nuts and bolts of how this communication system works. He said, you're fired. And I did a couple years back. I had a Hogue prophecy report where I had the shot of all the people that were there before Musk and all the main people who are like the virtue signaling. This is what truth is, and this is what. And if you don't do it, we shut you out. And unfortunately, I had to say one thing I noticed is the majority, the crowd was predominantly women. There's some men too, but and everybody was smiling too hard. They're all like, smile at the camera, smile to the birdie. It was just too forced. It's kind of the Gavin Newsom smile, where
Mhm.
if you smiled harder, his teeth would break before your eyes.
It-
Um, now,
Let me
now,
just say, all right. I
yeah,
just
just
wanted to
I'll
interrupt.
finish
Just
just with
okay,
now the
okay,
other
go ahead.
side when they had the people that were left when there's Trump going like this, and you got more, he's got more programmer type guys and gals. There were also gals, and they were like going ah, but there weren't as many. It was more mixed, and they weren't in perfect attire. They weren't all clean and well washed completely because they're too busy creating stuff. I have the pictures. It was, I mean, that's my take on it. If you see the pictures in different ways, fine. I'm interested in what people have to say, but, um, and it was literally the one was packed with people. They almost were busting out of the windows in the one shot, but then it was more normal. There was a lot less people. So you got that feeling of volume, 20,000, 8,000.
Right. Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was. I'm going to go off on a tangent really quick here. I saw a documentary on Jacqueline Kennedy,
Ah,
and so when Kennedy was assassinated, she was in mourning, and then she moved to New York. She spent time there, but she was being attacked by these photographers that, she was suing and all this stuff, right? And she was worried about the safety of her children at the time.
yeah.
But there's this famous picture of her walking down the street by Central Park. I believe it's on the west side.
Mhm.
And she has this quick turn of her head and her body as she's walking. The photographer is in a taxi going by, and the taxi cab driver knew that it was her and honked the horn, and she turned. But before she smiled, it was just like the picture was taken, and it was just the beginnings of the smile. So the photographer calls it the Mona Lisa smile.
Yeah,
Just the beginnings of a smile.
I've seen that
And
picture.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking
I
about.
didn't know
So
how it was made though. I
no,
didn't.
no, yeah,
This is
yeah. And the
interesting.
thing is that that photographer was told to leave her alone, and
Yeah.
they were in court. I don't remember the name
Yeah,
of
he
the
was
photographer.
acting like paparazzi.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so
Paparazzi.
he had to kind of like do covert operations in taxi
Yeah,
cabs.
it's wrong. It's just like, you and you gotta render a person, celebrity or not, into a thing. Oh, I want to take a picture of this thing,
Right.
because it's really, there's no empathy for that. I mean, um, yeah, I think those kind of photographers are the worst. The paparazzi. That guy's a paparazzi. You know.
All right, right. And he admitted he needed it. He took the
Yeah.
pictures for the money.
This reminds
Because
me of
that
what.
would go into the post or whatever.
Well, yeah. It was, I think, in the post, and it became. I mean, I could draw it up probably online right now. But it reminds me of something that happened when with my father and the Hollywood paparazzi in the late 40s. Um, my father, when he came back from the war, he used to be a really good bartender. That's how I learned how to properly pour a beer, where you almost have your glass horizontal. But you got to do it just right so it flows in and it doesn't spill, and you don't make too much suds. And so he taught me that. But anyway, so anyways, in this bar, and in comes in somebody that looks almost like his twin, and he gets up against the bar and gives him a drink, and it's Robert Mitchum. My father they look like they could be twin brothers.
Wow.
And whenever I watch a Robert Mitchum movie, just the way he walked and those thick eyelids like my father had, and just the way he spread his legs, and just the way he just was he sounded like my dad. Um, so kind of sensual and threatening. As that's what Tom Robbins said it is, those heavy lidded eyes like Rossini. He said that's what Tom Robbins said once about It was a
My
scary,
father, the way
dangerous,
he
heavy-leaded-eyed guys. Anyway, so there's a flash
uh,
in the darkness of the bar. Somebody lit off a camera flash, and it was some paparazzi guy that used to come there and drink and eat. And my father said, "No, no, this is a private place. Please, this is don't do this. This is a private place. Don't use that." And he said, "Okay, I won't use it." And so actually my father, Robert Mitchum, got to he used to come there a lot. It was right after Robert Mitchum had had all the public problems with marijuana smoking and the famous picture of him mopping the jail of Hollywood and all that. And they thought we were going to destroy his career, but they didn't, fortunately. And so a week or so later, my father pulls out the newspapers and one of the hush hush rags, and there's a shot of him at the bar with Robert Mitchum, both looking at the flash and looking very much alike. And this is Robert Mitchum's uh, secret twin brother. so, so everybody's in this bar. This is happening and all that. So my father is kind of a patient Taurus. Even when an issue has to have the law of the street involved with it. And so he looked at it and kind of went, I wasn't born yet, but this is what I'm hearing. And went on with his life. And many months later, um, he's going up to Sears, I think, and the revolving door is going around. My story about my father is he grew up in tough neighborhoods of the 30s. He learned how to street fight, and I love sitting with him watching the early Cassius Clay and then Muhammad Ali, and Sonny Liston and all that. He would give me a color blow by blow as it was happening. It was just amazing because he ended up going the Army Air Corps, for it was the Air Force, and it was part of the early stages of the occupation of Japan. And his most famous thing when I said, "What did you do in the war, Daddy?" He said, "Well, son, I ran a whorehouse in Kisarazu." My father was a very colorful fellow. And so um, but he also because he's ambidextrous like me, he he used to eat is he used to use the God, I'm really losing my mind today. The tweezers, the chopsticks. And he'd always, like I do, I grab whatever hand's closest, if it's this one, that one. And so he'd just grab it, and then he would grab it like this and do the chopsticks the other way. And of course, all the kids loved it, and they loved him because he gave them a lot of candy bars and stuff. So whenever his Jeep was coming in, and all the kids would be running down the street and going, "Oh, Musashi, Miyamoto," and and they called him Musashi because after the famous samurai of the 1600s, I think, because Musashi used to fight with the swords both ways. He was, and so they call him Musashi. And of course, he was a big, strong-looking guy. Anyway, so we're back in Hollywood or somewhere around there in downtown LA or something, and so it's the Sears, the rotating glass door, and guess who's coming through the door? The same hush hush paparazzi guy who kind of made that whole fake story about him being twin brothers with Robert Mitchum. So he kind of goes, He had an idea. And what he did is, as soon as the door opened and the guy was coming through, my street fighting dad did a short punch to his chin and knocked him down like a rag. And then he stepped over him, pushed the thing with him in it, and went out. And I said, "Why'd you do that, Dad?" And he said, "Well, son, I figure the best lesson I could teach this guy is to not know who he pissed off. You know, just hit him, knock him down. And then when he comes to, he's like, who was that? Who was that? And then maybe think twice before he done those things, where he says, look, this is private, and then he takes the shot. Look, he takes a shot of Jackie O, you know, like that. My dad were around, he probably would have he stepped out of the taxi and he would have knocked him back into the taxi. carry him forth. You know, but that's a different kind of life. That's not what I would do, but my dad had a rough life. Um, he grew up in Watts when it was a barrio in the 1930s, and his family, his only gringos. And this is an elementary school. And he said, well, son, I had to fight to get to school and fight home. Because if a fight happened, it ended up that this is before switchblades and guns, But if you had a fight, someone picked a fight with, oh, gringo. My dad, when he was 13, he looked 21. He was 200 pounds. He grew up very fast. And so he's already big. So everybody's trying to pick on him. And so what happens is if you defeat the kid, then you have to defeat his cousin, then you have to defeat, and it ends up you fighting with the adults. He had to like fight the whole male family for their pride. And he really learned how to fight really hands-on, literally. And there was one day where he's coming to the door and he's all beaten up, and these guys are behind him, the adults, and his Dutch Hogue, my paternal grandfather, who was a cowboy from Mandan, North Dakota, who bred horses in Montana, and he's also a rodeo rider, and I mean a real cowboy. And so he threw down his paper, leaped from his chair, ran through the screen, ripped the screen in two, and while these guys were looking at it in shock, he beat up all those guys. So, he also he was also a character. I never knew him. He died before I was born, when my father was in his teens, actually. But another character, if he was not wearing a shirt working, if the kids come up and they see this big gash on his side, and they'd go, "Wow, where'd you get that?" And he's, "Oh, son, I got it. I was in World War I," and so he'd talk about how he's fighting the Germans, and the guy bayoneted me. And of course it didn't happen. It was he got his what's the little thing that the thing you get out sometimes, I
The
can't,
appendix.
the appendix, yes. I should know, I've gotten it taken out. But there's some interesting sideline stories there.
I think that there is there's a commonality between what we're talking about with Jackie O and paparazzis and
Yeah.
what's going on even at the Olympics with the
Yes.
wokeism. There's this borders are civility is breaking down. We're not respecting civility. You can apply it to even the presidency of the United
Yeah.
States, the office. When I mean the presidency of the United States, I mean the office of, right? Or
Yeah.
the office of the speaker,
Yeah.
the speakership in the House of Representatives.
Boundaries are breaking
Right.
down.
Yeah.
There's,
Yeah.
there's a need for boundaries.
Yeah.
This idea of, oh,
You
we don't
you
need any boundaries. Well,
you see it even on X, all right?
yeah.
Formerly, Twitter was, the same thing was happening on Twitter, but you see it on X, where someone may be following you and they're seeing your feed, right?
Yeah.
But they feel obligated to litter your feed with their comments or their posts.
Yeah.
And and maybe I'm old fashioned, but I view like social media is okay, your channel is your property. And
It
that
is.
if you don't want someone to post some sort of sign on your front lawn, you can delete it
Right.
or you can prevent them from doing it. But there's this, but what I'm
Entitlement that, oh, I
noticing
can
is
just do
yeah,
that.
there's
Yeah.
this exactly. There's this entitlement that they feel as though they can just litter all
No
over
boundaries.
the place.
No
And it's just
boundaries.
a lack of civility. There's a
Yeah. A loss
lack
of
of civility.
civilization. It's barbaric.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, even the people called barbaras, the Greeks, when they listened to Macedonians, they sounded like they were going bar. That's where you get the word barbarian. But they were not barbarians. They had a culture. They had things. the Goths had cultures and things, but yeah, I mean, in a way, that's been the thread of a lot of this. The thing about people taking liberties. I mean, to be liberal doesn't mean you take liberties with people. I mean, liberality is where you. I mean, I've sometimes have come back to this often, where I will define conservatism the way Teddy Roosevelt defined it. You know, that to conserve things that are worth that don't need fixing but are really important. Conserve them. I mean, there was no Democrat that started the national park systems. It was Teddy Roosevelt, because he fell in love with the nature and nature. It used to be that conservatives were the green people, and people forget that even Nixon was very active uh, as a Quaker, uh, trying to help people, Black people. He was doing that, and that's all forgotten now. Um, the it is literally the word the Vikings use for their Armageddon, Ragnarok. We are in a state of Ragnarok, where the stability, the boundaries, the things that hold civilization up are broken down and taken
Mhm.
over. And it is and that and the core of that is in the woke movement. And this idea of people saying, I'm a woman rather than a man, and then people not helping them kind of deal with that. And uh, as I did with my friend, and I did not force him to make any decision. I made it clear that I think you want to cut your penis off because you hate your father, and he as a Jungian psychologist said, yeah, I think that's it. But with all of that, we let, and then it happened, and then years later, she then was saying, I've destroyed my life, was the dumbest thing I ever did. And I remember that RT, their documentaries are great. They had an American documentary on this. It was really good, where they had all the majority of people that have done that years later. They're saying, "What did I do that for?" Because it's a disease. This is a boundary, folks. That you cannot become a fairy and fly through the air. I love fairies, but you can't do that. If you get off the ledge, you will fall and break your neck. You can, if you have turned yourself to appear like a woman and pumped yourself up with hormones to shape the throat and the bone structure of your knees and other things to look more like women, you still have a prostate. Women don't have prostates. And you have to have the capacity of a womb, whether you lost it or took it out. If you were born with one, whatever you do to become a man, you're not a man, you're a woman. And to have this boundary that's disrupting women's sports, where that gender dysphoriacs are saying, even if you change over, you have the musculature that you're born with, which is male, if you want to be female. Uh, and they're destroying it. I mean, talk about why we used to fight for women's rights. It's destroying women's rights. Um, and
It almost makes you think, is there some sort of psychological warfare that's happening
it
between
is.
genders? Because it seems to me that the ones that are athletes, that are male athletes, that have supposedly the gender dysphoria, and they're want to transition into females, and they're going to be now in female sports, there seems to be a common thread. They're not very good as males in the
Mhm.
sport.
Yeah.
So I
They're going
just,
to abuse
but
women by
yeah,
being
it's
good
I
enough, because
exactly.
this situation is that somebody, I just saw these women athletes talking about this. If you look at there's a certain rate, and I mean, why, what is wrong with boundaries? This is if you have no boundaries, you have no society.
Exactly.
I mean, I tell you stories. There were times in the Pune ashram, Westerners come and they would and Osho was alive then, and what would happen one time, we had some guy said, "Oh, I'm just not going to wear clothes anymore." He started walking down Mahatma Gandhi Road, downtown Pune, and just about started a riot. And Osho was who is it's Osho always said he's totally for freedom with responsibility. The more conscious you become, the more aware you become, the more responsible you have to be for yourself. And if you're in a land where that is just not done, I mean, you can be naked in your privacy, but don't go walking down the street naked like that. Um, what do you think will happen to you if you do that in Saudi Arabia? You know, there are real intelligence finds balance. Uh, you have to find a balance. It's just like I'm saying about right now, this no boundaries, radical liberalism, wokeism that's happening is going to kill this country. We need to get back into balance, have boundaries. Um, we need not to be so in a rush to turn diseases into a new social group. What's next? Schizophrenics? I'm a schizophrenic, so you have to if I ever start hearing voices, you have to listen to what my voices tell me and to do. No, you were hearing voices because you're sick. It's unfortunate and we're here to help, but it's like that's so balance. I mean, just to be free. There was a time in the beginning of the Soviet Union where things were really wild and free, and everybody's breaking up their marriages and having multiple partners and all that. And then they had to kind of sit down on it by the mid 25, in 1925. Because in fact, there was one story where a police conductor on a street is seeing a woman walking right down the middle of traffic, and he stops her and says, "What are you doing? This is dangerous." Says, "I'm just doing my freedom. I feel like walking down a busy street, and this is what the revolution's all about." She probably got run over in the Moscow traffic. Um, that's not freedom. That's licentiousness. Licentiousness is not freedom. Licentious is I can do whatever I want, no responsibility for anything, anybody. If I want to, crap in the middle of the street, what are you going to do about it? That's just crazy,
That's
so
how I feel New York is turning into. I
yeah,
feel,
I'm not even in New York these days, but man, what I'm
I just,
seeing,
yeah,
I don't want to go to New York now.
no, I mean, it's turning into a public bathroom. It's turning
Yeah.
into a lawlessness,
It
theft.
wasn't this bad in the 1970s. This is much worse.
It has a BLM movement kind of feel to
Yep.
it too.
What are all these
There's a
mass robberies? All these, which are literally closing downtowns around the country where people kind of are moving their chains out and all. I mean, watch the footage of it. People just coming in droves and just taking, like locusts, taking. The problem with this is that's how you get fascism. If you're licentious and you're doing this and you have no respect for people's space, people's lives, their businesses, their what they're that you just grab things and run away with it. That's when you get the stormtroopers. You guys want stormtroopers? Then sit down on some of those folks that are going that far, because what then happens is somebody comes in with the police and they start shooting people and they start arresting people and they start shutting everything down like the Nazis did. And sometimes, and that's what I was saying to these liberal guys that were saying, I would never support what these Republicans want to do. I said, oh yeah, you will. I said, yes, you will. When it's all going crazy, you will be one of the first people to become fascist and say, law and order, shut these people down.
Well, just case in point. I mean, whenever a Republican president is nominating someone to the Supreme Court, you have the other side, the ultra left,
Hmm.
almost threatening the lives of that nominee. You
Charles,
take the other way, you take it the other way around, where it's the
no, you don't
Democrat
get that. Yeah.
president. Yeah.
You
I
know,
mean, so it's just so flipped upside down. They want you
well,
to think
hmm,
that the Republican Party is, this, we're just going to burn down the town.
nope.
But the reality is 9 out of 10 times, it's the ultra left that's burning down the town if they're not getting what they want.
I've always found when I go to red states that people are more courteous. If
They were
they
more
not
respectful
blindly
of people's
react,
property.
yep. People who own guns respect guns mostly. I know because my father trained me how to use a gun. I don't have one. I don't want one now. But it's and really the what I'm talking about, this was not even considered Republican when in the America I grew up in. A lot of these things that people think are so far right and all, that was the Democrats. People had the respect, watch your neighbor, go to church, all that, or go to wherever you go, or go into yourself. Um, civilized to be what's being lost in this country is especially in the blue states is community. The concept of community is that you have to accept that people have differences of opinion. But if you shut them out and shadow ban them and virtue signal them and take them off the magazine or whatever like that, they're still living in your town. And if you can't find common ground with your neighbors, if you can't commune with them, your community will die. The things that'll make you able to eat or work or all these fundamentals of life, that'll die. We have a whole country that is in this fight. And, I think whatever faults of conservatism, I find that side at the moment much more civilized than what's going on in the streets of a lot of blue state cities and stuff. I mean, the other thing too is that the BLM movement was an awful attack on law and order. It suddenly was like I mean, I've worked in security when I was on the ranch and also in the ashram in India. So I'm somebody with a security background, modest, but there it is. That's the basics. The basics is that you're going to need, rather than now, there's things happening with the police I hate, and that's where they're militarizing the police is a bad thing. And unfortunately, it's bipartisan. All this stuff is being, all this hardware from the battles where we destroyed Iraq and destroyed other countries to save them. And then all that hardware comes back, and now all these guys are getting suited up. And I have a lot of readers that are work in the police forces. I have one that's he works in Harlem. And I have talks with them. Um, they agree with me that a lot of people that are being hired to be police are really not healthy enough in their heads to do it, and a whole lot of, I mean, the basics of self-defense and being fit and knowing how not just go for the shoot to the center of the body, not to let it escalate to guns. It sometimes has to go there, but this is such a quick jump to that. So there's an education or a different education that has to happen in police force work, and these guys need to know the law. A lot of them don't know the law, what they can and can't do, and private property, they just do it. But at the same time, you've got governments that are thinking with no boundaries, trying to woke people up that um, defund the police. Now, New York got a huge defunding of the police. A lot of the detectives got taken off. How are you going to do long-term investigations in crimes without detectives? The other thing is that when you take the police out and then you demoralize them, you make them feel shame, and that you go and burn down their police center departments, and these guys leave. They leave the country. Said, God, the people hate us, and we're risking our lives, and these people don't even care. We're risking our lives every day as that thin blue line, and the people don't want us. So guess what? They leave Minnesota, they leave Seattle, and the middle of Seattle and middle of Minnesota and St. Paul burn. And the people that get abused the most, with people just looting and being released after committing crimes because they're a social group that's not being properly treated. Well, I don't know, that there's certainly that going on, I can tell you. But if you release a person that's raped somebody or murdered or robbed somebody, he's going to go rape and rob again. And and so and what happens is, you know, I I used to work in Watts. My father's lived there, but I used to work all through the inner cities of LA doing theater. I would play the wolf in Little Red Riding Hood opera, children's opera, and we ended up literally going to every school across East LA, Compton, Watts, North San Pedro, um, all the places. I was all through the inner city. And the thing I was so shocked to see is how uh, they do two classes at a time. We go finally up to the sixth grade. And, I kind of, a lot of kids, I look like a bear, and they would be talking, little red, look out, that bear, don't look out for that bear. And, but it was just beautiful. But what I saw was by the time we got to the fifth and sixth graders, we were afraid for our lives. They were like, well, I'll tell you what I'll do, and pull out the knife and all that. And I watched every day for months that I did this government system thing. And for all the schools, the elementary, middle school, kindergarten, all throughout the LA inner city during the latter half of the 70s, mid 70s, latter half, I watched how those neighborhoods destroy kids. And so you need what we used to have more in the policing. There were more people that would work with the police as social folks. But now that's all stripped away. And now it's just the cop has to be the social expert. And some of the most dangerous situations are domestic calls, keeping families from fighting each other. And then you get into a point where they say, we don't like you people, we're gonna get, and some idiots are out there with no boundaries saying we don't need police. Well, you know who that hurts the most? The people I saw in Watts, the people I saw in Compton, and I saw in the inner city in North San Pedro and all those areas, because they're the people that are going to get hit first. If Black Lives Matter, these are the Black lives that are going down first. So it's madness.
Mhm.
It's, I suppose, something Gurdjieff said, great mystic who I'm paraphrasing. He says there comes times when all the great culture and things established and built for eons, for millennia, there comes a time where the normal people just lose their minds, the average guys. And then in the end of ages, they end up just willfully destroying all that was built before. And we're in one of those situations now. He was talking about that in 1916 when World War I was beginning. This is a long process. It really started in the 20th century, and now it's reaching to a culmination in the early 21st. So it's I think a little timeout if we go a bit far right is probably better than going more far to the left. Otherwise, this whole country is going to collapse.
Mm.
And I'm saying this has always been a left of center guy. I mean, but again, I have hope in the the red state people I know. They'll debate, they'll discuss. They remind me of the America I grew up in, and they remind me of Democrats, not John Birchers and stuff like that. I mean, this is how your average Democrat dealt with stuff back in the 60s and the 50s when I was growing up. So, and that's all gone now. Now, when they say, oh, these extreme right people, they're talking about right center people, just slightly center from the right, extreme right. And it becomes this, I mean, the press has no boundaries. They're they're all paparazzi now. So, my master Osho was famously free, but he also, and I think a lot of disciples also did not understand that with freedom, you have to become more responsible. And the more freedom and consciousness you have, you need consciousness to kind of be aware of where the boundaries are. These people are saying, I don't want to think about boundaries anymore. I just want to pretend I'm Jesus Christ in front of millions of people in the sane, and I'm morbidly obese, and I think I'm beautiful. No, you're sick. You need to change your diet, do something. No, you're ill, and you will die an early death, and all kinds of things because you're morbidly obese, and you're showing it all out there with hardly anything on. Well, okay. What you're showing me is your insanity, not your liberality, not something insightful. You want the world to be as insane as you are going. And I'm not a person who will follow that. And so, and I'm a pretty radical guy myself, beard, Nostradamus
What
scholar.
what was
I'm not
interesting, at
mainstream.
least for me, growing up in Michigan,
Mm,
and the whole automotive
mm,
track, I always viewed France as a place of culture. Of when at that time, if someone said France, I'd be thinking um, uh, vineyards, art, opera, these cultural things that are supposed to add sophistication to one's human existence. But you fast forward to what we just saw with the Olympics, and there were a lot of elements that are like something right out of like Clockwork Orange or
yeah.
something.
Good analogy.
It's just like,
Clockwork Orange.
yeah,
Yeah. That
it's
was a
just,
Clockwork Orange work.
yeah. No, I'm serious. It
But
is.
here's the
I
good
mean,
thing. A lot of people were pissed off by it. I'm hopeful because there's coming a point now where certain boundaries are being crossed, and it always happens in revolutionary times where there's a point where people are afraid to say stop that, and then when it comes to a point where they really feel it's threatening the whole future of things, then they fight it. So, that's what a lot of these woke people are setting themselves up for. People are going to say enough. This is insane. If they don't, then it's like Atlantis sinking or something like that. It's just maybe it existed or not. It's like, it's like, I mean, the myth of Atlantis is they became so advanced that in their island that they lost all morality. They were the kind of the America of the ancient prehistory world. The history that kind of got lost. And the archaeologists and people are so dogmatic they don't want to even consider that maybe things go a lot farther back than they wish it would. Even though there's evidence, definitely, if you look at maps being made by mining ships to see of new resources under the sea, they're finding whole city grids off Ahmedabad, off Gujarat, India. There's even been some documentaries about structures, everything, which means that these cities go back to 7,000, 8,000 BC, not five or not three, and there are aspects in the Rig Veda, the oldest scripture of Hinduism, surviving scripture, that describe a constellation aspect astrologically that hasn't happened in 70,000 years. So, there's one must stay open, but also one must stay with boundaries. Balance. I mean, this is where I hold a lot of hope for China, since now they're coming really as a great influence in the world. And this is what I have as a core of that, what's going on with the majority of the world that's trying to rise out of this madness of, and the thing that really resonated with me, they're saying, look, first thing, build the foundation. Have a world where all countries are sovereign and their sovereignty is respected, unlike the way America does not respect anybody's sovereignty, always telling you how you should be. And if you don't, we'll take the dollar away. And what are you going to do? Because we're the only dollar around. Well, now you're not. This is what happens to your bullying. You finally push people over a line, and now, and that final outrage was freezing Russia's $3 billion of its own reserve. It's the biggest heist in history. Everybody in the rest of the world said, we're pulling our money out of your banks. You people are crazy. And so here we are. And what's happening then is now these countries are coming together and saying, let's form an alternative rules fair-based world order of sovereign nations, where the first thing we need to do is get out of this era of America causing chaos all over the world. America has no boundaries. That's a problem too. Because we are addicted to war. We have a war industry, which is the last industry we've got, and you cannot have peace and make a profit with war. So America's been stuck into this addiction of war. And so to have war, you have to always find adversaries, polarizing people, causing friction, causing a world that's toxic and stressed out. This is what America's been doing. And it's finally crossed a line. And the majority of the world, you will not hear this if you're not on alternative media, but it's the big news, folks. The whole world is turning it back on us because they've had enough. 500 years of this Western abuse and exploiting people, and they're making them work like slaves and taking all their resources to make empires and end up fighting world wars. I mean, it started a lot of people, the freedom movements in a lot of the developed world started after World War I because they said it looks like the gods fell on their faces. They all fought each other in World War I, and all these empires disappeared and all that. And they were saying, these white people aren't superior godlike beings. They're idiots. And people started to get their own, let's rise up. So this move away from the West started especially because of World War I. And now it's reached this culmination where they're moving. They're creating a new money system. They don't need the dollar anymore. They're moving their money to their own places. They are not interested for now of getting into other countries' businesses. It would be like if you're in a community and you have all these different houses in your community, you're going to stop breaking down the door and telling people what they should and should not do in their own house. Now, it's kind of, it's an experiment. We might discover there's things with this that will have to change, but unfortunately for now, if Saudi Arabia wants to be the way they are with women now, that's the way it is. Because if you want to change it the way you're changing it, you're starting World War III, and then everybody's dead. So live and let live. That is what the majority of the global state of nations is wanting to do, and they're amalgamating around the BRICS. And a very important thing, October is going to be a momentous reckoning month for so many levels. So it comes to the full culmination of the election, whether we'll have a free election or not, whether it be jury rigged again or not. Less chance of it now, but who knows? But it's also the time when the BRICS are meeting in Kazan, Russia, in the Muslim Republic in Russia of Kazan, where they respect the Muslims and the Muslims respect the Christians. And it was made there specifically to show. I mean, the Russian Federation is a great example of how you can have 130 different ethnic groups and cultures, and in autonomous republics as well as states and provinces, and it works. They're at peace. The only problem they have is with the West trying to break them up. As they openly NATO leadership, we want to break up and destroy Russia. Well, if somebody said, I want to break up America, that's an existential threat to me and all the 340 million Americans. And if they're really doing it, we fight back. Well, that's what we're doing to Russia. We're doing exactly that. It's none of our business. So we need a timeout where stability, spreading opportunities of wealth for all countries, building this belt roadway that is literally linking the great African Eurasian continent, the single continent, because basically Africa is attached to Europe and Asia. We just drew a canal through it, but it's still attached. And so that's the thinking. So, and they're doing it mainly because of all the way the West has tried to control the seas and control commerce. And now they're getting their own back from the people of Yemen, who are the only people standing up other than the Hezbollah. They're the only people standing up and fight for what they say are our people, Palestinians. And they shut down the American Navy, and they're hitting Tel Aviv. And they're getting firebombed by U.S. and Israeli jets, and boundaries. And so boundaries of nations are also to be respected. And because we need to cool this world down, we need to let the military-industrial complex have no more business in making wars forever. This is perverse. It's now we destroy nations to save them, and we're not saving them. So the rest of the world is saying, stop it. And they're making it happen. And if you read me and my sources, you can check to see if I'm full of it or if I'm onto something. But don't believe me. Don't disbelieve me. Check me out. Check if what I'm saying resonates or not. That's what intelligent people do in a democracy. They don't, in dictatorships, people blindly believe what the television's telling them and what the cell phone is telling them and what Facebook is telling you. And Google and all these people who are, except for X, are trying to control the situation. So that's
So we've
name of
reached
that.
our end. We've reached the 2 hour mark here.
Yep,
But
that's it.
I want to remind the audience, please click the link that's in the description box of this video and all the videos that I've done with John. That will take you to the website, and you'll be able to sign up for his periodical. You can do a reading. You'll learn a lot. You'll help support his work. John has also written more than 50 books, so check that out. But I think that the overarching theme today was society has boundaries, and that if there is a point in time that when certain boundaries are crossed, then there is some sort of negative externality that happens.
And balance
You
must
can,
be restored.
right. I remember reading a book a long time ago, just to be short here. It was about politics, and it was not just American politics, but politics globally. But it was talking about a pendulum, and the pendulum swings, liberalism or conservatism, and this arc of time, could be 60 years for some countries and maybe 40 years for others, but there's this swing. And I
Yes.
do think that what is happening is that um, perhaps we need to swing the other way and move a little bit more towards conservatism, because I
Yeah.
think what has happened is we've lost our way with this concept of country, of family,
Yeah.
of mindfulness, religious connection.
Yeah. It's I there are problems with the family, but it is I mean, I'm going to write a book later in the decade which will look at an evolution of the family system becoming the whole community of will literally where your whole community is your family. Kind of it's the eternal recurrence of history that we started as tribalists, but the full circle could be in another great era of kind of being conscious tribalists, where it's not about tribes pitted against or just survival, but just the whole. I mean, Hillary Clinton probably stole the phrase from somebody else, but it's a good phrase. It takes a village, and in a lot of the world, the village is that kind of life is still existing. And what would be good though is if the problem with marriage is that is from its inception, when people started wearing clothes and civilizing and not hunting and gathering anymore, it then became important that your children were actually yours, and so because you had property. Now, I lived in a very experiment of that for 4 years in Oregon in the Osho commune, and I'll be in this book able to talk about a lot of things Osho and us planned to do if the U.S. government didn't shut us down for practicing our First Amendment rights of a religion that was not the same as all the other more comfortable religions. And it was because of religious pressure from the religious right, which was very politically powerful during Reagan's administration, that had our commune destroyed, my master poisoned, and all of that. And they were going to do
Jim
Waco on
Jones.
us, a
Oh,
Waco. They were
Waco.
going to do a
Waco.
Waco on us. And that was Operation Serenity. That didn't happen. Someday I'll have to talk about that because it's all documented by a dear friend of mine, a fellow sannyazin who was also a New York journalist before he was a sannyazin. So he put on the three-piece suit, nylon suit, and went back out, and did it and got tapes, audio tapes, transcriptions of everything that the US government was doing about us. And it's quite shocking. But that was back in the 80s. It's a lot worse now. But the thing is, the I'm trying to work together. I've been 30 years thinking about this book and how a new kind of unit of interacting community, which preserves the individual integrity of everyone, but also communes. If we had kind of a situation where like the kids belong to the commune, that's what Osho used to say. So it's everyone's responsibility to teach them. Now you don't have just a mother and a father. you have a few thousand aunts and uncles. And it was open if the children wanted to be with their mom and dad, that was fine. Nobody was forced, it's just like you create a climate and people adapt to it rather than you will do this. No, we didn't do that. And so it's kind of out there, but it could be a future that could happen that might resolve it. And it's probably going to be one of the last things I have the time and health to write. As I think I have probably a one more good decade left before the
You got to
sickness
think
industrial
positive.
complex gets a chance to make a lot of money off of me.
Well, let me just remind the audience, please click the link and go to John's website, take a look at his periodical and do the readings that he does. But thank you very much, John, for coming onto the show. And
I think I'm
this was
channeling
an
Tulsi Gabbard. Thank you.
I think that this conversation was kind of interesting because of just the current events and the philosophy of boundaries,
Yeah.
and how, and the flow of the conversation. For the ones that are listening, none of this is planned. This is all off the cuff.
No, I don't have
and
notes.
it's very flow. It's just a free flow of
It's free
conversation. Yeah, so I like it that way.
Yeah.
So, but thank you very much for sharing your insights on this channel, John, and we'll do episode 18. Yeah, no problem. And we'll do episode 18 in a couple weeks.
All right. I'll be ready. And the world will have changed.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
That's not a hard prophecy to make.
Right. The world's changing every 40, every 4 hours.
Yeah. It's like,
no, it's getting intense.
Welcome to my life.
Right. It's getting intense, but you have to say goodbye to the audience there.
Goodbye to the audience.
Okay. All right. Let me stop the recording here.